There comes a time in every life when the long season of preparation gives way to the moment of action. For years you may have studied, wrestled with discipline, endured failure, and wondered why the lessons came so slowly. Yet, like the hidden roots of a tree spreading quietly beneath the earth, those unseen labors were forming strength within you. Training does not often look like glory. It looks like repetition, weariness, correction, and sometimes the unbearable silence of waiting. But training, though quiet and often thankless, is the secret ground on which courage is built. When one says, "Your training is complete," it is not to suggest that learning has ceased. Rather, it means you now carry within yourself the strength to face what stands before you. The one who has been trained no longer trembles at the sight of trial, because he knows that trial is the very arena in which his training bears fruit. Consider how a musician, after years of scales and mistakes, finally stands before an audience. At that moment, the training is not abandoned, it lives through every note. In the same way, your training has not vanished, it has become a part of who you are. There is a subtle danger in believing that life is only preparation and never performance. One may spend endless hours perfecting knowledge, rehearsing virtue, or gathering courage, yet shy away when the door finally opens. Training is never meant to keep you in the schoolhouse forever. It is meant to release you into the world, to stand where uncertainty calls, to step forward into the battle of ideas, of choices, of responsibilities. And when you stand there, trembling perhaps, yet still rooted, that is the announcement. Your training has served its purpose. Often, we mistake the end of training for the end of struggle. That is not so. The end of training means you are now strong enough to struggle well. You are no longer tossed about like a child in a storm, bewildered by every gust. Instead, you stand with feet planted, with knowledge tested, with habits hardened into instinct. You are no longer in the realm of practice. You are in the realm of application. And here is the truth. Application is the true test of whether the training ever took root at all. Think of a soldier who has drilled endlessly with sword or rifle. When the day of battle comes, his arm may shake, but his hand remembers. The repetition has written strength into his muscles. Likewise, your spirit has been trained. It remembers the nights of discipline, the mornings of prayer, the hidden hours of endurance. They were not wasted. They have been engraved into the very fiber of your being. And now, when the challenge stands before you, you need not invent new strength. You need only draw upon what was placed in you through patient training. Perhaps you doubt. Perhaps you say, "I am not ready. There is more to learn, more to practice, more to correct." And it is true. You will never exhaust the depth of what could be known or done. But readiness is not about knowing everything. It is about carrying enough strength to take the next faithful step. Training equips you not with certainty about all things, but with courage enough to begin. And when you begin, the training continues in the very doing. For life itself, once you step into it, becomes its own teacher. You must also remember that the purpose of training was never for your own comfort. You were not prepared simply to admire your strength or to enjoy the applause of others. Training was given so that you might serve, so that you might stand where others could not, so that you might carry a burden others were too weary to lift. The mark of completed training is not pride but responsibility. It is not the feeling of triumph, but the willingness to be spent for something greater than yourself. There is also this mystery. Sometimes you discover your training was complete only after you are thrown into the fire. This struggle reveals the depth of what was planted in you. Many have found themselves doing what they thought impossible, bearing pain they thought unbearable, enduring darkness they thought unendurable. And only afterward, when they look back, do they realize that every long, hidden day of preparation was leading to this moment. The storm does not erase your training, it proves it. So when you hear the words, "Your training is complete," do not imagine that you have reached the summit where nothing more is required of you. It means, rather, that you are now ready to be poured out, to face the tests for which you were shaped, to walk into the calling that once felt too heavy for your shoulders. The time for delay has passed, the tools have been sharpened, the strength has been formed, the lessons have been written in the secret places of your heart. Now comes the moment to rise and step forward, not because you are flawless, but because you are prepared enough. True training does not end when lessons are finished, but when the strength has been written into your very being. True training does not end when lessons are finished, but when the strength has been written into your very being. For many people, the idea of training is tied to a classroom, a mentor's voice, a strict routine, or a structured practice. They imagine that once the teaching ceases, the training is over, as though learning were a task with clear boundaries and an end date. But real training is something much deeper, something that takes root in the hidden layers of the soul. It is not completed by closing a book or hearing a final lecture, but by reaching a point where what has been learned is no longer separate from who you are. The lessons have been carved into you, engraved into your instincts, and the strength that was once external discipline becomes an internal reality. This is why true training cannot be measured by a timetable. It is not about how many months or years you spend in preparation, but about whether your being has been shaped in such a way that you carry strength without even thinking about it. Imagine the craftsman who practices the same stroke of his tool again and again. At first it feels repetitive, even futile, but after countless repetitions, his hand no longer needs to recall the lesson, for the motion flows naturally. The training is complete not because he remembers what was taught, but because his very hand has become the teaching. In the same way, the athlete who has endured the rigor of discipline does not pause to recall every instruction when the competition begins. His muscles remember, his breath remembers, the discipline has etched itself into his body until instinct carries him where memory alone could not. What was once external effort becomes internal strength. And this is the essence of true training. It is not about storing lessons in the mind, but about weaving them into the fabric of the person until they can no longer be separated from the self. This transformation often happens in ways too subtle to notice. A student may feel frustrated because she still struggles, still doubts, still fails in small ways. She may think her training is unfinished, that she is weak or inadequate. But unseen within her, every trial is forming resilience. Every failure is building humility. Every correction is chiseling away what is unnecessary until only the essential remains. Strength is not written in bold letters across the surface of life, but is inscribed in the hidden places. Only when the storm comes does she realize she can stand. Only when she is tested does she discover the training has already been written into her. It was never about perfect performance in practice. It was about allowing the practice to reshape who she is at her core. We often make the mistake of thinking that training is about information, about collecting knowledge, about memorizing instructions. Yet information can be forgotten and instructions can fade. What cannot be erased is transformation. When the person himself has been changed, when the old habits are broken, and the new ones have become as natural as breathing, then the training has done its work. To learn patience in theory is one thing, but to embody patience in the silence of suffering is another. To hear about courage is one thing, but to step forward in fear is another. To know about endurance is one thing, but to endure without thought, because endurance has become part of your nature. is the true sign that training has been completed. It is also important to see that true training is not about perfection. If one waits until every flaw has been erased before declaring the training complete, one will wait forever. Perfection is not the goal of training, integration is. The lessons do not need to eradicate weakness entirely, but they must be absorbed into the person so deeply that, even with weakness present, the strength remains unshakable. The mountain does not need to be free of every crack to stand unmoved in the storm. What matters is that its foundation is unbreakable. In the same way, the person who has been trained is not flawless, but he is steady. His character has been written into him so deeply that he does not collapse when trial comes. True training is also marked by freedom. In the beginning, discipline feels heavy, rules feel restrictive, and effort feels exhausting. But when the training has accomplished its purpose, what once felt like a burden becomes a natural way of being. The pianist no longer feels confined by scales, but freed by them to create beauty. The soldier no longer feels weighed down by drills, but strengthened by them to stand firm in battle. The believer no longer feels oppressed by duty, but liberated by obedience that has become joy. This freedom is the sign that strength has moved from the outside in, that what once required constant effort now flows without resistance. The soul is no longer at war with its calling, but united with it. There is a quiet dignity in one who has completed training. They do not boast of their strength, for they hardly think of it. The strong tree does not brag about its roots, it simply stands. The trained soul does not parade its discipline, it simply lives faithfully, steadily, with a strength that others recognize even if he does not. This kind of strength is not loud or flamboyant. It is quiet, resilient, enduring. It does not collapse in crisis, it does not wither in hardship, and it does not boast in success. It simply stands, because standing has become part of its nature. That is the beauty of training. It changes what you do into who you are, and so the true measure of training's completion is not the moment when you feel strong, or the day when you no longer struggle, but the quiet realization that what was once a lesson outside of you has now become part of your very being. You no longer have to recall the words, for they live in you. You no longer strive to imitate the example, for it has shaped you. You no longer cling to the rules, for they have become instinct. Training is not finished when the teaching stops. It is finished when the strength has been written into your soul so deeply that it cannot be undone. That is the moment when you are no longer just a student of the lessons, but the living embodiment of them. The completion of training is not the end of struggle, but the beginning of responsibility and application. The completion of training is not the end of struggle, but the beginning of responsibility and application. Many believe that once the lessons are finished, once the discipline has been endured, they will finally arrive at a season of ease, where challenges vanish and burdens are lifted. Yet training does not prepare you for a life free of struggle. It prepares you for a life capable of carrying it. To imagine otherwise is to misunderstand the purpose of preparation itself. Training sharpens the blade, but the sharpening is only meaningful if the blade is placed into use. The farmer does not sharpen his plow so it can rest on the wall. He sharpens it so it can cut into the earth. The craftsman does not polish his tools so they can shine in the sunlight. He polishes them because he knows they will be tested against wood and stone. The very sign that your training is complete is not that hardship ends, but that you are now strong enough to face it with steadiness. There is a temptation to think of training as a shield against all difficulty, but in truth it is the preparation to enter difficulty with resilience. Consider the soldier who endures endless drills, sleepless marches, and exhausting tests of endurance. He may long for the day his training concludes, imagining it will mean rest and peace. Yet the end of training is the beginning of battle. The hours of sweat, discipline, and correction were not given to him so he might live in ease, but so that he might stand in the day of trial. The test of whether his training was real is not found in the practice field, but in the battlefield. Likewise, the completion of your own training does not mark the end of struggle. It marks the point at which you are now able to stand and struggle without collapsing, to endure weight without breaking, to move forward with strength that was once beyond you. Responsibility follows closely behind the end of training. For as long as you were being shaped, corrected, and instructed, you could rest in the care of the one who was guiding you. Mistakes were expected, weakness was excused, and growth was the focus. But when the training is complete, responsibility rests on your shoulders. You are no longer the one being carried, you are the one called to carry. You are no longer only the student, you are the one expected to live out what has been taught. The completion of training is not a certificate to hang on the wall, but a burden placed in your hands. It is the moment when you are entrusted with a task that once seemed far too heavy, because now it has become possible through the strength formed within you. Application is where all the hidden lessons are revealed. In the classroom or in practice, one may believe they have mastered the material. Words can be recited, steps can be repeated, drills can be executed. But when life presses hard, when confusion clouds the way, when fear whispers that you are not enough, that is when you discover whether the lessons live only in memory or whether they are written into your soul. It is in the moment of choice that training proves itself. The one who was taught integrity in theory may speak noble words, but when temptation knocks, he will know whether integrity was only memorized or whether it has become instinct. The one who was drilled in patience may nod at the principle, but when long suffering stretches across his days, he will know whether patience was only admired or whether it has become the very posture of his heart. Application is not a betrayal of training, it is the true completion of it. For only in use is strength revealed. This is why the end of training is not the lightening of your load, but the taking up of greater burdens. You are now expected to bear weight that you once could not carry. You are now entrusted with choices that affect more than yourself. You are now responsible not just for learning, but for living, for modeling, for leading. To shy away from this is to waste the very purpose of the preparation you endured. It is natural to feel fear when responsibility rests on you, but it is a holy fear, a reminder that you are stepping into the place you were shaped for. The end of training does not release you into comfort, but sends you into calling, and calling is always costly. It is also worth noting that responsibility is not only about what you do for yourself. Training equips you not simply to stand, but to help others stand. The stronger tree does not exist only for its own sake. It gives shelter to the weaker plants beneath its shade. The trained soul is not given strength merely for personal triumph, but so that it might lift those who falter. When training is complete, your responsibility is no longer only inward, but outward. You are called to serve, to teach, to protect, to guide. The mark of completion is not pride in your strength, but the willingness to spend it for the sake of others. The lessons you once received in humility are now entrusted to you to pass on, not as a burden, but as a gift to those still in the early stages of their own preparation. The completion of training also brings with it the sobering truth that excuses fade. While under instruction, one could claim ignorance, one could stumble under correction, one could lean upon the patience of a teacher. But once trained, the expectation rises. You are no longer judged by what you do not know, but by what you do with what you know. To carry responsibility is to recognize that your choices matter in a way they once did not. Every step you take influences others. Every word you speak carries weight. Every action reflects not only yourself, but the discipline that has been entrusted to you. Application is not about proving your worth, but about living faithfully with the worth already formed within you. So the completion of training is not a doorway into ease, but into duty. It is not an escape from hardship, but an entrance into the rightful use of strength. You are no longer the apprentice who looks to another for every answer. You are the craftsman who must now take up the tools and build. You are no longer the child who waits for guidance at every turn. You are the one who has been entrusted to guide. This is why the end of training is never the end of struggle. It is the point where struggle gains meaning, because you have been made ready to meet it with courage and responsibility. You know your training is complete not when fear disappears, but when courage enables you to step forward despite it. You know your training is complete not when fear disappears, but when courage enables you to step forward despite it. Fear is one of the most persistent companions of human life. It lingers at the edge of every new responsibility, every uncertain path, every challenge that demands more than we feel we possess. Many believe that the completion of training will bring about the absence of fear, that once they have been prepared fully, their hearts will never tremble again. Yet this is not the reality of true growth. Fear is not erased by training. It is placed in its proper position. Training does not promise the removal of trembling, but gives the courage to act in its presence. To believe that one day you will feel no fear is to chase a shadow. To understand that training equips you to step forward, even while afraid, is to embrace the deeper strength that lies at the heart of courage. Courage is not born in comfort, nor is it discovered in the absence of challenge. Courage reveals itself precisely where fear is loudest. The one who has been trained has not been promised a painless journey. Rather, he has been given the tools to endure what pain may come. Courage is the fruit of training because the soul has been shaped to recognize that fear, though real, is not sovereign. Fear may shout, but it does not command. Fear may shake, but it does not control. When training is complete, the person does not wait for the silence of fear to take a step forward. Instead, he moves into the unknown with the recognition that fear may accompany him, but it will not master him. This truth can be seen in every realm of life. The soldier who marches onto the battlefield feels the pounding of his own heart. The speaker who rises to address a crowd senses the dryness of his throat. The leader who takes up responsibility feels the weight of doubt pressing upon his chest. None of these are free of fear. What separates them from those who retreat is that they act while afraid. Their training has instilled within them a deeper loyalty to duty, to purpose, to truth, than to the voice of fear. They know that fear will always whisper, but they also know that listening to it above all else would paralyze them. The completion of training means that courage now outweighs fear in the balance of the heart. Training writes courage into a person not through a single moment of triumph, but through countless small steps. Every time you endured a trial that once terrified you, every time you spoke the truth though your voice trembled, every time you faced rejection or failure yet continued, a thread of courage was woven into your being. These threads, unnoticed in the moment, weave together into a fabric strong enough to carry you through storms. You do not recognize the strength until you are forced to rely on it. And when that day comes, you discover that fear, though still present, no longer controls you. The trembling may not leave, but it does not stop you from moving forward. That is the quiet triumph of training. It teaches you to walk with fear as a companion, but not as a master. The belief that fear must disappear before one can act is one of the greatest deceptions that paralyzes growth. Many wait endlessly for the perfect moment, imagining a future where confidence replaces every doubt, where calmness replaces every tremor, where clarity replaces every question. But that future never arrives. Training does not promise such perfection. It promises readiness, and readiness means this: to move even when the heart is not steady, to step even when the path is not fully clear, to rise even when the weight of uncertainty presses down. The absence of fear is not the sign of completion. The presence of courage in the face of fear is when training has done its work. It produces not arrogance but humility. The courageous person does not deny fear or pretend to be above it. He acknowledges it, feels it, but chooses to act nonetheless. That choice is the proof of training's completion. It shows that the soul has been anchored in something deeper than emotion, in something more stable than the shifting tides of feeling. It has been anchored in conviction, in discipline, in truth. These anchors hold firm when fear rises, enabling the person to move forward when others falter. The fear is real, but it no longer defines the outcome. Training has taught the soul that fear is a shadow that cannot dictate the direction of life unless you surrender to it. It is also true that courage often appears ordinary from the outside. Others may look at the trained person and assume he feels no hesitation, no inner turmoil, no doubt. They see only the steady step, the firm decision, the calm voice. But within, he may feel the same fear that grips everyone else. The difference lies in what he has been trained to do with it. Rather than waiting for it to vanish, he has learned to carry it while still moving. This is the invisible strength that training cultivates, a strength that looks effortless to others but is in fact the result of years of hidden battles, unseen endurance, quiet victories over fear in the shadows where no one was watching. The paradox of training is that it teaches you to accept fear's presence while stripping it of its power. It trains you to hear the pounding of your heart, yet still speak, to feel the trembling of your hands, yet still build, to sense the weight of uncertainty, yet still walk forward. Courage is not born when fear is gone. It is born when fear is acknowledged, yet denied the right to rule. This is the mark of maturity, the sign that training has accomplished its purpose. You need not wait for a fearless heart to act. You need only act with the heart you have, strengthened by the lessons that have been etched into you. Thus, the true sign that your training is complete is not a life free of fear, but a life where fear no longer dictates your choices. It is when you discover that the voice within urging you to step forward is louder than the voice that tells you to retreat. It is when you realize that trembling does not mean weakness, but the birthplace of courage. It is when you understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but faithfulness in its presence. And it is when, despite the shaking of your hands and the quickening of your breath, you still take the step that lies before you, knowing that your training has given you the strength to walk forward even in the company of fear.